And so, with one story closed off, we return ourselves to another dangling plot thread to the comic teased several issues ago. Unfortunately, it's going to involve one of my least favorite characters in the comic, but hey, doesn't mean that the issue as a whole is going to be bad. The cover is off to a pretty good start at getting me curious, giving us an example of how to use white space effectively, mostly by having it swallow up our heroes who are all looking less than pleased about the situation. And then you have those claws peeking out around them, and this wouldn't be too out of place on a horror comic. We open on Sonic doing his best to be a rep for extreme sports everywhere, bungee jumping down into Robotnik's new lair. After he makes a GoldenEye pun, Robotnik orders his SWAT bots to shoot to kill, not interested in taking prisoners today. Sonic hurries to a computer terminal, knowing that all he has to do is get in, grab what he needs, and then get out. Which he does, not even staying around very long to taunt the good doctor, dashing out and back to Knothole where he meets up with Sally and Jeffrey St. John, who says that if Sonic had failed, he would have been able to handle the mission himself. Nice to see the dick measuring contest has already begun. Once again, Sally has to be the voice of reason and get them to lay off of each other. After she shuts them down, Rotor brings us up to speed on what's going on. Turns out that the last time they were in the Zone of Silence, they didn't actually stop it from collapsing, they just delayed it. But now, with the component that Sonic brought back, not only will they be able to stop the collapse, but they might be able to save King Acorn as well. Sally, however, insists that since they're going in there after her father, she should be the one to head in. Alone. Because she's the smart one. Both Sonic and Jeffrey point out that going in there alone probably isn't the smartest thing to do, and that both of them are going with her, but because the two of them can't even agree with one another without somehow disagreeing, the two of them end up in an actual throwdown with one another, Sally once again having to break up the fight, and just telling Rotor to open the portal so she doesn't have to deal with this shit anymore. Before they head in, Rotor gives them all a series of jetpacks, created after the trouble they had moving around in the Zone of Silence last time, which should allow them to move around more easily. Of course, he hasn't really had a chance to test them fully, so there might be some bugs. Foreshadowing, maybe? No, not really. Anyway, he opens the portal and the three of them walk in, armed with jetpacks and the magical piece of tech that Rotor says will fix everything. Cut over to the still-armored King Acorn, who says he feels the presence of Sonic the Hedgehog entering his domain, just in time for a little toad, uniquely named Toady, begging him for scraps of food, which he provides to both the toad and a bunch of other odd-looking creatures around him. These are apparently the subjects he's been ruling over during his entire time in the zone. However, as he's talking to his subject, the creature seems to disappear, replaced by Sally, Sonic, and Jeffrey. But just as Sally reminds him that she's his daughter, they fade from existence once again, replaced by Toady and friends, confusing the king and Toady, since Toady didn't see the intruders and has apparently always been standing right in front of him, only confusing the king further. Cut over to Sonic & Co. as they hover there in the Zone of Silence, Sally stating that she's getting a funny feeling and cutting off Jeffrey and Sonic before they can start another pissing match with each other. Just as Nicole states that she's picking up some very strange fluctuations in the zone's magnetic field, the shift causes them to fall down on top of a little floating island where Sonic discovers the helmet that the king was wearing before. And then, just off in the distance, they see the king talking with themselves. As it turns out, as Nicole charmingly puts it, Robotnik's experiments on the zone have affected its quantum energy levels, basically meaning that they're gonna start tripping and seeing visions of stuff that happened in the zone's past, and even its future. Then they get a quick scene of when King Acorn was first cast into the zone, and the rather nasty bump on the head he got as a result, because of course everything can be linked back to head trauma. He's discovered by the zone's local residents, those gargoyle-looking things, who name him their king and dress him in the armor he was wearing before, and he treated them just like his own subjects, even leading them to safety. However, they confuse a real storm for part of the mirage, and end up getting caught up in the wind, with Sonic being separated from the others and meeting with the king, who threatens him before Sonic is launched away by a mysterious force, thrown onto another rock where his companions are. They're in some sort of swirling vortex that's threatening to consume them. Meanwhile, all of the king's minions are making their way into the whirlpool for some reason. Meanwhile, the king himself appears before them, demanding that they hand over the device if they all want to make it out alive. Sally once again attempts to appeal to him as his daughter, but while he hesitates, his memory is still too warped for him to remember anything about her, and so Sonic and Jeffrey have to take the lead on this one. Sonic jumps the king while Jeffrey floats off with the princess to get her away from the danger zone. Sonic and the king fight for a moment, reenacting the scene that Sonic had seen earlier, with most of the dialogue beat for beat the same. But this time, he just jets behind the king and knocks him out with another punch to the back of his head. This completed, he takes the king and his horse and goes back to find Sally and Jeffrey, telling them to activate the neutralizer now that they have the king safe and sound. They're enveloped in the neutralizer's bright light, and then we cut back to them walking through the portal back to Mobius proper, with the king in tow. They lay him out on the ground as Sonic wonders just what happened to all the other creatures living in that zone, while Rotor states that he's sure they're fine and everything's gonna turn out hunky-dory for him. Let's not actually show that, let's just say that they're fine, that's good enough, yeah. Once again, it builds off of things we've seen before and lays to rest one of the longer plot threads of the comic's early lifespan, bringing the king back from his prison. It continues the frankly annoying love triangle between Sonic, Sally, and Skunk Thing, and was actually presented in a rather interesting way. There are 2 or 3 points during the comic where the dialogue is repeated verbatim due to the whole seeing the past and future thing, but each time, rather than repeat the panels, the scenes are drawn at different angles. So while the situations are the same, the artwork conveys something different, which I do appreciate. It is a bit more verbose than it needs to be though, to the point where the dialogue, especially the arguments between Sonic and St. John, just feels tiring and annoying. And while the repetition in the comic is lessened due to the shifting artwork, the fact that the dialogue is the same doesn't do it many favors. Artwork this time is handled by Kent Taylor, and he does a decent job, but it's a little all over the place. At times it looks beautiful and just detailed enough to look really cool, and other times it kind of looks like there was an entirely different artist handling it. It's especially jarring when you have an example of both in the same panel. Check out this one early in the comic where we have a very well detailed and threatening looking Robotnik, with an incredibly weird and cartoonish Sonic doing a spin move here. And the whole comic is like that. It never dips into downright ugly though, but it is inconsistent enough to be noticeable. Next time, strap in folks, because it's miniseries time again, and this time, instead of focusing on a particular character, it is a quest. A Sonic quest. I'll see you all next time, everyone.